Okay, it looks like we're live. Is that correct? We're on the air here?
I believe so, James.
Okay. Welcome, everyone. This is Jesse Hops. I'm the founder and CEO of Demand Metric. I'll be talking to you a little bit more about our session in just a moment, but before we dive in, I'd like to give you just a really quick high-level background on Demand Metric. We're one of the sponsors here today. At the highest level, we do software and consulting for our customers. We help them to essentially get new products to market faster by improving their processes and managing their team with our platform. I think that's about it for now. I can provide more information later on in the session if people have questions, but I'd like to dive in here. So first things first, our session is new product development and go-to-market, how to launch successful new products faster. I'm joined with me today by a dear friend of mine, Fran Livingston. Fran is actually a customer of mine for many years. We've done a number of projects together, and Fran's actually also a mentor and an advisor to Demand Metric. Fran, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell the listeners here just a little bit more about your background and some of the experiences that you've had.
Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. So my name is Fran Livingston, and I'm going to try to give you the perspective of from an engineer to a CEO, the new product development process and go-to-market process. Started my career after graduating from the University of Pennsylvania with an undergraduate degree in engineering and a graduate degree in business. Went to work for Westinghouse and served as an engineer, application engineer, project management, and then went to Department of Defense for several years and ran the advanced weapons systems development programs at the Department of Defense. Came back to the private sector and took a job running a global business group at AEG Daimler, which was a control systems company in Europe. Then went from there to run the Siemens Production Logistics Systems business group, which became a global business group. Grew it from about 50 million in revenue to about $1 billion in revenue over the course of about 8 years. Eventually took a job as president and CEO of a Pittsburgh-based company, Benshaw, which I'm still involved with 20 some odd years later. And today I am founder and CEO of Projects IMC, a Pittsburgh-based technology company. And I'm an active investor and sit on the board of 4 industrial companies that are trying to make their way through the COVID experience. And some of that experience I want to share with you today.
Excellent, Fran. Just before we dive into your kind of part of the presentation here, I do want to just remind everyone that Demand Metric has just a plethora of different tools and resources available for product managers and marketers to really do almost all aspects of their job. Today, we've got a special offer and a couple of free downloads of our product development playbook, as well as our go-to-market framework. If you'd like to download these resources, you can find them in the Q&A section, just on the right-hand side in your screen, and then in the answered area. If you go to the answered section, you'll see links to those 2 documents. Those will be posted for the duration of the session, so you can grab them. We will post this as well toward the end of the session as well. Okay, so diving in, we really want to kick off today with some real-world examples of how organizations were impacted by the COVID situation and how that's sort of impacting new product development cycles and go-to-market in particular. I thought it'd be helpful for everyone to hear from Fran's perspective how different organizations that he's a part of have been coping with the COVID situation and really what the impact has been. So I'm gonna just basically pull up a couple of slides here and Fran will talk through a few of the key insights that came out from this year.
So the first most significant impact of the COVID crisis on industry, industrial companies, was it created what was for sure the worst cash crisis in a generation, in generations, I should say, which really impacted the survival of each business. And to this day, we're still about halfway through, I believe, the crisis from a business perspective. And what really happened in the midst of the crisis was the reality that we had to take products from the development pipeline to the sales pipeline urgently to basically generate as much competitive advantage and as much cash as we possibly could. So the emphasis of the reality that the go-to-market requirements have went from being just preparing the marketing content to really delivering results in the sales pipeline. So that whole concept of go-to-market, I think, where the sales pipeline is now the finish line, if you will, of the go-to-market process. So basically, the requirement to go cash to cash, which is the cash investment in the R&D side of things, back to the cash recovered on the sales pipeline side of things. So that's and to this day is still a major crisis ongoing within most industrial companies. So,
yeah, definitely just an overall emphasis on not only getting products to market sooner, but actually, higher quality marketing and really an effort to get sales opportunities into the pipeline as soon as possible. I mean, that's always sort of been the goal, right? I guess just now there's a lot more pressure to get those deals in the pipeline a lot sooner. All right, next one here. So remote teams, how has that been playing out from what you've been seeing out there?
Yeah, so remote teams is a fascinating situation. Many functions are actually better off, including new product development, go-to-market. My observations are they're more effective, more productive as virtual teams than they were as physical teams. And the best example I can think of, there's a Pittsburgh-based company called Benchell that I'm involved with, and their new product development and go-to-market teams, the product management team, global product management team is located in New Zealand, and half of their development team is in New Zealand, the other half is in Pittsburgh. The projects they've been working on over the last 6 to 7 months have actually accelerated in delivering their deliverables compared to prior times. So certain processes, certain functions are definitely more effective as virtual teams. Is kind of the lesson learned. And that's a major thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think going into this year, you asked the average manufacturing company if work from home was sort of the standard or an option or was going to accelerate things. I don't know if you hear a lot of CEOs saying, yeah, I think we're going to let everyone just sort of, do their thing from home. That's really interesting to see that you actually saw, real efficiency gains when you moved to that remote kind of team model. How is sort of this idea of social distancing, right? Like how we're, interacting with one another in society these days. How is that sort of changing or driving a need for more, connected products, smart products, things like that? Are you seeing more demand for devices and things that can be sort of connected to the internet?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's changed forever. So the need for remote monitoring, remote maintenance, automation really forces products to become smart and to become connected. So the migration to those technologies, I think, has been accelerated 5+ years. It's an absolutely urgent need now to have smart, connected products.
Interesting. I think one thing that is kind of a phenomenon I've been noticing the past year is just, how traditional industrial type manufacturing companies are now, software companies as well. And they're not really used to developing software. Some obviously have been in the game for longer than others, but all the mainstream and even smaller companies I'm talking to, they're kind of struggling with, what's the right methodology? We're using sort of a more stage gate approach over here. We're using Agile as we do development and trying to get those methodologies to sort of work together. We'll talk a bit more about that later on in the presentation, but I find that to be kind of a fascinating situation as well. What about just, this idea of going from being nice to have to sort of a necessity? I mean, is there, really strong requirements coming out from the market saying that, this isn't just like a nice bell or a whistle that you're putting into the product, something that's going to be core to what we need? Did you see some change in that this year?
Yeah, it's dramatic. I mean, from a customer application use case perspective, again, the need for automation, the need for remote monitoring or remote maintenance, really it forces it to be a requirement, not a luxury anymore. So I think those technologies, really adding electronics and embedded software to a product to make it smart, and communications and SaaS functionality to make it intelligent is absolutely a fundamental need going forward. It's no longer nice to.
Well, I'm just thinking too, for a lot of young product managers that have come out of school recently, you think, oh, I'm a product manager, I went to a great school, I'm going to go work in California, or in Austin or some tech hub to work at a tech company. You don't maybe think there's a lot of jobs out there, a lot of interest in bringing talent in product management and development into an industrial type of company. I hadn't even considered that, to be honest, the past few years, that there was a lot of demand for those types of skills in companies you wouldn't otherwise maybe think to go looking for some work. So to all the listeners out there that are in the product management business and looking for some opportunities right now, I'd urge you to look at industrial manufacturing companies. There's certainly a lot of demand for this type of talent out there right now.
Absolutely.
Last one here. So the macro effects of kind of post-COVID-19, how do you see things changing sort of going forward here? What's the vision for the future, do you expect?
Yeah, I think the best way the way that I think about COVID, as I step back and look at what's happening, it's really fast forwarded. So it's almost like we fast forwarded a movie 5 years. So all of the technology adoption situations from both software, electronics, virtual tools, all of that's been fast forwarded 5 years, in my opinion. Everything's been people have been forced urgently to adapt to the situation. And so things like virtual operations, working from home, agile processes are going to be essential, and supply chains have been disrupted permanently. So everything that was happening prior to COVID has been accelerated 5 years, in my opinion, at least 5 years. And so it really brings forward the adaptation of technology and the need for technology to be embedded in what used to be dumb products or now need to be smart and connected products. So it's a permanent effect, a permanent and significant effect on the industrial products and medical products, manufactured products, essentially.
Yeah, I think that the trendy terminology right now is kind of it's been a forcing function, right? It's sort of making organizations try new things, right? The working from home model we talked about, trying new technologies, new types of ways to manage processes and people. So I think overall, I mean, as awful of a situation as it is, there's been some good and a lot of innovation that's come out of it. We're going to talk a bit more about innovation and some best practices there in a couple of minutes, but I wanted just to kind of end off this section with a quote that I read from McKinsey this year, and I thought it was interesting. It was just so blunt, right? Agile sounded good before, now it's imperative. And I really do believe that, organizations worldwide are not just trying to adopt Agile as a theory or as a management system, but really truly be a lot more nimble in terms of understanding their customers and their requirements and getting new solutions out into the market faster. This kind of brings up the issues, right? So what's holding organizations back? Obviously, there's a lot of pressure on getting new product to market, getting the sales in the pipeline, trying to solve for the cash crisis that many organizations are under. But in our research, we spent a number of months this year looking into new product development and where the industry's at, and where it's doing really well and where it could be improved. And one thing that sort of dawned on me when I was doing some research and just reflecting on innovation overall is that I'm the oldest millennial that you can find. I was born in '82, so I guess I'm sort of that bridge between generations to some extent. And I didn't notice it until I just kept reading over and over again that we've always been in some sort of a crisis. Like there's 2008 and 9, we had like a massive financial crisis. We've got a huge pandemic. Like I can't remember a time when there wasn't massive amounts of change and disruption in the world. That just seems to be the norm for my generation. And so I think this idea that organizations need to adapt and be more innovative to deal with social, political, financial situations is sort of a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, you've got a lot of opportunities out there, but on the other hand, there's a lot of risk, right? There's a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes in industries, a lot of disruption that's happening. So my theory on this is that those that come out ahead, right, the companies that are going to win are the ones that have a core competency around innovating and getting solid, not just any product, but solid new product that meets a customer need and solves a problem out there the fastest. And so I think there's a real imperative on helping organizations really get more velocity in their new product development process. But all the research I've read says that, these processes, as documented and defined as they are in some organizations, are to some extent broken. All the stats that I was able to find didn't paint the rosiest picture of new product development. I'm sure, Fran, you've overseen how many product launch or product development cycles do you think you've been a part of over the years?
Over 100.
Over 100 of them. Okay. If you had to guess, how many of those as a percentage kind of went according to plan, hit the launch deadline, exceeded the sales targets that you were shooting for? Are we talking 30, 40%, 80%, 5%? What's sort of the standing success rate on those?
I would hate to admit it, it's probably 50-50.
Oh, 50-50, eh? Okay.
Getting better as the years went on, but
I'm curious to hear about some of the drivers, right? We're a research organization as well as a consulting firm. And so we're constantly doing, surveys and different types of benchmark research to just, see where the world's at with different things. I did want to ask the audience if we've got some people here that are willing to participate in a poll, just to tell us a little bit more about your NPD process in your organization. So I've just opened up a poll. If you go into the poll section, it should be on the right-hand side. The question is really around how defined is your NPD process? Is it sort of completely undocumented and ad hoc? Is it sort of loosely defined, where people sort of know what they're doing, but it's not really written down? Do you have an actual defined process, right? A picture, like a diagram that says, okay, this is what we're going to do. These are the activities that need to be completed. Think of kind of like a stage gate or phase gate type model. And then the last option, and what I think is sort of the holy grail here, is that you've got a defined process. You know what your deliverables and activities are, but you've ingrained that process into some sort of a software that provides visibility across all operations in the company, right? Engineering, product marketing, the creative and marketing organization building the content. And you've actually built out some templates for the deliverables so that people joining the firm, they know what good looks like, essentially. So my question is, where are organizations at in terms of that spectrum? I'm just going to leave it open for another minute or so, and then I'll share the results from the poll and as well what we've seen just in other industry research that's out there. I'm just going to plug in my result here and submit. Okay, and then wow, okay, so I'm going to end the poll here. I'm not entirely surprised by the results that I'm seeing here. I'm not sure if this will pop up on the screen. I haven't used this software before, but what I've basically seen here is we've got about 20 responses. 68% said that they had a loosely defined process. About 26% said that they had a defined process with their activities and deliverables sort of well defined in there. So about 26, not too bad, I don't think overall. About 5% have no documentation whatsoever, and 0% said that they use a software to manage their NPD process and that they've actually built out templates for the core deliverables of that process. So from where I'm sitting, there's a lot of opportunity to improve in terms of how organizations are bringing product to market. That sort of corroborates the research that I've done. I found a report from Serious Decisions, who's part of Forrester now. They said that only about 30% of organizations have an NPD process that's defined with what are the actual activities and deliverables that are required at each stage. And that's in line. We said we had about 26% in the poll, so I think that's about right. I think the overall impact, though, of not having well-defined processes, good templates, kind of software to manage and gain visibility into this is, a bit of a slower or more delayed time to market for product innovation. Fran, I'm curious to get your perspective on this. In organizations that you've been a part of, have you found that there's any sort of correlation between, how well the processes are defined, tools are in place, people are trained on how to do their step in the process, and speed to market or mitigating, delay? Or do you think that those two things are not all that connected?
No, they're 100% correlated. There's no question, Jesse, that more and more an agile process, but a process has to be in place, both on the go-to-market side and on the new product development side. You really need to think about those two things as simultaneous equations. You kind of have to solve them both simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, the Center of New Product Development said that the average NPD project exceeds its kind of planned schedule by about 120%. So that's usually a matter of weeks or months. What do you think if you were to average out your 100 product launches? What do you think the overtime, percentage or even time frame, if it's, weeks or months or whatever, what do you think the ballpark is for a pretty standard launch? Are we talking a couple months late, or what's the standard out there?
I think this is pretty accurate. The problem is that the average is a little bit distorted because there's a high percentage of developments that are more than a year late. So mainly
Really?
When the requirements and the technology specifications aren't coordinated up front, then you wind up with extreme delays, because at the end you find out you've got a $500 solution addressing a $100 problem. So those are the kinds of things that delay.
So you think the average is maybe not the best indicator, because some are way late, where some are a little closer to on time. So looking at maybe the median would be a better option. Well, one stat I found from Gartner, and this I'm assuming is more slanted towards technology products, less around just industrial products in general. But they said around 45, right? You said 50, and 42% didn't hit their business goals. And so I thought that was even more telling. It's one thing to get to market on time. It's another thing to hit the sales goals when you get there. And so I think there's kind of sort of two different problems there that need to be attacked. At the end of the day, the reason why this is such an important problem to solve for organizations is that, when you launch products and you're late with them, generally speaking, it actually has a statistically significant impact that's negative on profitability. There was a study done by the Georgia Institute of Technology over 16 years of 450 public companies, and they proved it out. If anyone's interested in checking out the report, I can find a link and get it out to you guys. But it's a really interesting stat that organizations that get better at this actually make more money. So there's a big reason, I think, to invest in this functional area and try to get better with it. So with that being said, let's talk a little bit about how to get better, right? So we know what the problems are. We know we're in this situation where there's a lot of disruption and change with COVID, and software products kind of getting married up with physical, manufactured products. How do we get new product to market faster and sell more when we get there? Those are the big questions I've got. So Fran, I'm just going to kind of tee you up with some general questions here, and if you can sort of put a little bit of color behind some of these, maybe share some stories that you've got from your experience working and managing 100 different launches over the years. This is one I hear all the time, right? So solutions looking for problems. How do you avoid that phenomenon, and what's sort of the impact if that's the case?
Yeah, I think the best way that I think about it now, Jesse, is from hard lessons learned, a new conceptual model, which basically says address the go-to-market or product management functions issues at the same time as you're developing the technology alternatives. So really thinking of it as a simultaneous equation where you have to be clearly defining the value proposition financially, the value proposition to the customer in terms of what the product functionality, features, et cetera, will be. So really a conceptual model that addresses new product development and go-to-market simultaneously, I guess, is the lesson I learned after 40 years.
Well, you see the models, right? I mean, I've looked at 100 of these models, and it looks very linear, right? And so you kind of got, engineering more on this end and go-to-market and marketers on this end. Well, if you don't have the marketers working on the front end of that process and sort of testing ideas, talking to the salespeople, really finding out, is this a problem we're solving, and is this something people pay money to solve, and what other options do they have? I mean, a lot of that kind of what I would call software engineering, or figuring out, the customer development piece of it. I'm afraid that that's maybe where part of the gap is here, is that we have a lot of really strong technical innovation happening around what's possible, but we're not always validating that with customers early on in the process. You might find out later on that, while it's a really cool innovation, it's not actually something that's commercially viable. I'm sure that's never happened to you before, but if it ever did happen, it might be very costly to figure that out.
Right.
Okay, next one. So how about how do you better understand and prioritize both business and technical requirements? Do you have any secret sauce for everybody out there today just to get better at that part of the job?
Yeah, again, I do thinking of it in terms of a simultaneous equation, and it gets even more difficult post-COVID, because what's happening, at least in the industrial world, is products have to become smart and they have to become connected. And so you're adding two new technical requirements to our traditional either electrical, mechanical, electromechanical products. So the technology problem is 3 times as complicated. And on the go-to-market side of things, you need to now be delivering omni-channel components to your go-to-market strategy. So going forward, coordinated, prioritizing, integrating the two teams, the technical team and the marketing team, from day one is the critical, and making an agile, fast process, I think, is
marching down the path together. Okay, got it. So the key is just not operating in a vacuum or a silo, but sort of, tackling that as a cross-functional team that's kind of spanning different disciplines. Okay. Speaking of which, right? So a lot of product managers out there come from a technical background. Not all of them, but many are engineers. You were an engineer, I believe, before you became a product manager and a GM. So how would you, I guess, recommend that product managers get better at the marketing side of the job, so that maybe if there's less sort of need for two functions to come together, but maybe someone that has kind of skills on both sides to help bridge that gap between the two departments? Any tips there?
Yeah, no question. That's a tremendous learning opportunity / challenge for an engineer. But basically, having the tools, the platform, the agile processes, and the support, the training and the support to be able to make that transition from an engineer to product manager is critical. You can't do it on your own, I guess is what I'm getting to.
You need to get some outside help and support. Well,
it's that level of education that's required.
Well, I think it's coming to events like this on a Saturday morning, right? And just trying to hear from other people, how they've done it. Obviously Demand Metric as a company, this is kind of really what we're all about, is trying to help upskill people by giving them tools and resources to learn, how to do different parts of their job or new jobs that they've maybe just jumped into. So I know that there's also some great certification programs out there. IC Agile has a great new Agile product management kind of certification program and some instructors that are doing courses. So I'd encourage anyone that's, kind of come into product management from the engineering side to, improve their resume, right? Get new skills, get new certifications, always be learning. Don't assume that because you're unbelievable at mathematics that translates into being unbelievable at marketing. I think there's sometimes a discrepancy there in that, because you can do the math, you think, oh, I can do the marketing too. But I think in the real world, they're two, very important disciplines, and it's difficult to be good at everything without some training and some support. So, okay, moving on here. So, why is it so imperative to modernize a traditional kind of stage gate type of NPD process, with Lean and Agile? And where does Lean and Agile fit into that? Is that sort of at the front end of the process, the back end of the process, kind of all the way through? How would you describe how organizations should look at applying these more modern kind of management theories to some traditional type models out there?
Yeah, my experience, Jess, is over the years bringing Agile up front into the product development process. So you basically fail fast with prototypes, with market research, with customer experience studies, etc. So that you go well into the process before you go into a more structured waterfall methodology. That improves I think the hit rate from 50% to 90% in my experience. And those are the lessons learned after 40 years of doing a lot of things wrong. So I think basically bringing Agile up front in the process lets you make sure before you commit to further into the investment phase, before you commit, you've proven your problem and your solution much more effectively.
Just a quick side note on that. I'm curious about the team, right? So when you put an Agile team together, is that in the front end of the process, is that typically a cross-functional team that you're putting together to sort of go through that customer development process, kind of test some of the ideas that you have before you make that more substantial commitment? For sure.
Because you got to, again, it's a simultaneous equation. You got to prove both the technical solution, which is always critical to prove the most difficult technical issues up front, but you also prove the business value of the new product. So you have to put those teams together, cross-functional up front. In my experience, yes.
Okay, so cross-functional Agile teams up front in the process.
And so, yeah.
Go from 50 to 90% success rate. I like it. It's anecdotal, but it's a great starting point. One last one here is just, how can you possibly mitigate the risks of delays. You talked a little bit about solving for the most difficult technical challenge first rather than last. Can you elaborate a little bit more on why that's so important?
It's absolutely critical, because as an engineer, it's natural to put the most difficult thing. You want to make progress, and it's natural to put the most difficult technical challenges last and be at 80%. That's why you get it to 80% completion, and the last 20% it takes twice as much time as the first 80. So I think to mitigate risk of delays is two things. One, to tackle the most difficult technical and business challenges up front is clearly the first part. But also to make sure that you're doing those processes in parallel, so that when the technical product is finished, you're ready to go with the go-to-market package. And so those two things, I believe, have to be done in parallel.
Okay. Yeah. I've been doing some thinking, as you know, about this problem the past kind of year and a half, and I want to kind of share. Just maybe I'm naive. I haven't launched 100 products. I've launched one software in my life, and I think I made a lot of mistakes doing that. And so I think in just having gone through it once myself, we sort of evolved from kind of a research and tools and training organization into really kind of a software and professional services consulting company over the past 3 years. And I feel like we still haven't officially launched the product. It seems like we're in this kind of permanent beta where we're just constantly learning from customers and trying to improve the product based on what we're seeing their needs are. But in kind of stepping back from Demand Metric and just looking more broadly at how other organizations are evolving, fortunately we talk to 4 or 5 VPs of marketing or product development, product management every day. Those are our subscribers, right? So we're always constantly asking questions and learning from people that are out there. And I've kind of boiled it down to 6 or 7 kind of things that I think are really important. Fran, obviously you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. If there's anything in here that you think is really important or maybe less important around this kind of approach, by all means, chime in and sort of tell people what you think. But the first thing I think is really important is we need to standardize what are our processes here. Like, what are the activities we need to do, the deliverables? We said earlier that only 26% out there actually have a process that's defined, and they know what their activities are supposed to be. I mean, that seems to be something well within our control, to look at some best practices, what other organizations have done, and then sort of customize something that will work, for this particular organization. I don't think process for process sake is a good idea, but I heard from a really fantastic new product development consultant. His name's John Carter from a company called TC Gen. John worked on Apple's new product development process and helped them, build that out. And he said that, one of his kind of principles is you need to have the minimum amount of process, but nothing less. And so whatever you decide your process is going to be, don't over-engineer it. Don't have 58 million steps in there if you only really need to have 6. But if you're going to have 6, make sure you execute those 6 process steps very, very effectively. And so that whole idea of people overdoing their process, overthinking it, coming up with something really bloated, we're guilty of that, right? We're building frameworks all the time for different things in marketing and product development. And it's really easy to get caught up in the trap of you got to do this and this and this and this and this. Maybe if you had 300 people working on the project, you could do all those steps. But in the real world, often you don't have time to actually do everything you probably should be doing. And so I'm curious about your perspective on this, Fran. In the organizations that you found launched a little closer to on time, had more successful products when they got into the market, were they more process oriented, and did they need to kind of trim down their process ever or evolve their process over time? Can you talk to me a little bit more about the process layer?
Yeah, I think the best experience I had was with Siemens, who had some incredibly rigorous, excellent process, but complicated, really complicated process. And so to your point, I think a lean, agile process is really especially in today's world where the technology is moving so fast and the market requirements and the marketing requirements are moving so fast. So I think it's a great input. A lean, agile process really makes a lot of sense.
Keep it kind of simple. Okay, well, we build, what we call frameworks all the time. And so we have our off-the-shelf frameworks. They're probably way too heavy duty for most organizations. But I think the idea is to sort of trim those down to the absolute essentials, right? So this is an example. You don't have to use our examples, but I think every organization should have what are their kind of stages, what are those activities that they need to do, and what are sort of those tools. So if I can encourage anyone to sort of take a step forward and look at, building out their new innovation or go-to-market processes. Build them out, but then think in the real world, is this going to fly, or could we cut some of these steps out potentially and make sure that we're actually going to do them all if we're going to commit to this as our new process? That's sort of my first idea. The next one is that, to get things done quickly, right? If we're going to gain efficiencies and shrink the time to market, one way to do that is to just not have people reinventing the wheel every time they do, whatever document or exercise or analysis they're doing. And the other, I think, thing that's really good about having templates is that you can put some of your smartest people, even really senior executives, and get a lot of input around what is a good way to do this work. And then you can hand it off to someone who's maybe a little bit less experienced, a little bit more junior in the role, and have them quickly punching above their weight class in terms of what their outputs would be, because they had a solid roadmap to follow in the first place. Fran, the organizations that you've led, was building sort of templates into the processes, part and parcel with success on those launches?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also critical. That way you pass on the intelligence, the experience from the prior teams. So it's absolutely essential to build and develop learning, because you can modify the templates as you learn. So absolutely.
Well, yeah, I think it's not just a blank template. You also want to show a completed example, right? Of like, this is what good looks like out there, of someone else who's gone through this before. I think that provides a lot more context for someone that's jumping into it, to not just have this blank document, even if it is a template, but they can see, what one that's been fleshed out a little bit further kind of looks like. So, we've got tools, right? We've got all kinds of templates. If you're interested, you need tools. Demand Metric has literally 750. They're all rebrandable. You can knock off the logos. So, don't reinvent the wheel when it comes to building tools. They do exist out there. Ours aren't the only ones by any means. There's tons of great resources for templates. Just search when you're building out your process. Do some searches out there and see what you come up with. Next one here is around just, training people. I think it's a fundamental, simple thing to say, but, if we were to do another poll, I bet you people would claim that they don't necessarily know exactly how to do each step in the process that's related to their job function. So I think it's really important that you train your staff on exactly what their job is in that bigger picture process and how it fits in to the overall whole. We've got only a short amount of time here, Fran, so I'm going to have to kind of keep jumping through here a little bit quicker than I'd like to. But this last piece, we had 0 people in the poll that said they've built their process, they've got their tools, they've got their templates, and they know how to deliver. And now they've got that ingrained in some type of a project management or go-to-market operations type of software. No one's doing that. Fran, do you think that there's some efficiency to be gained by just having less kind of program management meetings, herding the cats across all these different silos in an organization, and having just one central source of truth for running that process through and having visibility between the different functions?
Absolutely. I think it's critical. I don't think you can, for almost every company, whether it's technology, industrial, medical company, the new product investments are the largest investments the company has. So getting those two processes in parallel is critical.
So this is just a screenshot from our platform, but there's lots of tools out there that you could do this with. The idea here would be to take your steps of your process, take your tools, load them up into a platform. And then every time you're going to run a new launch program, you would have all of that detailed information laid out and actually ready to execute. Moving forward here, training managers on Agile. We mentioned Agile and Lean quite a bit here. I think it's critical that organizations get some outside professional training in this, maybe some certifications for their key leaders. When you were a product manager, did you have an Agile certification for him? Was that something that even really existed back then, or?
No, it did not, and I wish it did. It's one of those things you look back and you say you wish you had these tools, this kind of training 20 years ago. So,
well, management theory is advancing, right? I mean, there's all kinds of new ideas coming out. Last but not least here, I think defining, tracking, and reporting on KPIs. It's always a fundamental best practice, but I think organizations get caught up in just looking at a specific part of the process and measuring it. I think it's really important to look at, you mentioned failing fast, just even measuring, like, how many customer interviews did we do early on in the process to validate our idea? To me, that's an important metric. If the answer to that question is 2, it's really hard to go to your CEO and say, hey, let's go spend $30 million on this new idea, when you've got maybe 2 people to corroborate what you're telling them to do. So I think having metrics that help you to build your case, build your story for all aspects of the NPD and go-to-market process are essential. Fran, real quickly, did you have some of those front-end metrics around, more of the agile stuff, the customer development work? And if so, are there any that you could share that helped you to understand if the team was doing a good job on kind of the upstream side of the process?
Yeah, absolutely. The metrics, the KPIs are critical. And what I think solving the most critical technical problems, and to your point, Jesse, having the metrics on how do we verify the customer problem and what is the value of the customer problem. Those are the most important metrics that I looked at. And today, again, this is after a lot of learning. Those are absolutely the most critical metrics. But having visibility across the pipeline and a portfolio of developments is critical.
Well, and a lot of organizations we work with are actually trying to measure between ideas, right? Like at the portfolio level, kind of scoring, like an opportunity ranking system. We built some tools around that to just help, kind of do a weighted analysis, right? Weighted score analysis of each different NPD idea. The last one I think is you just can't put your NPD process and go-to-market on autopilot, right? This is something that needs to be constantly looked at, improved upon over time and really proactively optimized. That's where having sort of a coach or someone that can kind of, give you a hard time about what you're doing and sort of second guess, your way of operating can be super helpful. Not everyone, has the wherewithal to sort of look outside of what they're doing day to day and sort of, see if it's kind of aligned with best practices. So I just encourage people to look for some outside support on being more proactive there. We've only got a few minutes left here, Fran. I do have a couple of questions here that have come in, and I do want to just recap on how to get the framework and the product development playbook that we'd offered as well. So I'm just going to jump into the Q&A here. We might only have time for a question or two. I do have one from Amritha that says, could you please elaborate what you mean by supply chains having been permanently disrupted? Fran, that was one of the things that we had thrown into our slide deck here. Do you have any more background on just, what you mean when you say that supply chains might have been, changed for the long haul?
Yeah, I do. I think it both from a geographic perspective and a make-buy perspective. So geographically and geopolitically, obviously, there's been disruption between the U.S. and China. So there's people have because their supply chains were disrupted unexpectedly during the pandemic. I think everybody that I'm aware of is rethinking their supply chain in terms of having multiple suppliers, but also in a lot of cases bringing things back in-house that they were outsourcing prior to the pandemic.
So you think there's going to be more actual manufacturing and production that's going to be happening in the U.S. going forward?
Absolutely. In North America, I think is the best way to think about it, but absolutely. The supply chain shocks were compelling for many companies, and still are, by the way. So we're only halfway through the pandemic from a business perspective, and so these lessons are still being learned. But I do believe that the supply chain concepts, strategies have forever been changed as a result of the shocks that happened.
That's interesting. We're just starting to kind of see the effects of those shocks now, I think. So just a quick reminder, if anyone does want to get some of these free resources from Demand Metric, you can go to our website and get a membership there, but you can also just go into the Q&A in the near the chat area, look in the answered section, and you'll have a couple of links there that provide a direct download to those resources there. I want to thank everyone for listening in today. Fran, I want to thank you as well for sharing your wisdom from all of the 100 launches that you've been a part of. And last but not least, if anyone has any follow-up questions or you'd like to connect with Fran or I after this session, one of two things: you can either meet us over in the booth. Demand Metric's a sponsor, so we've got a section in sort of the expo hall there, or you can just look us up on LinkedIn. We're both open sort of networkers. Fran really does a lot of work now on helping digital sales and marketing in the industrial manufacturing space. That's sort of his business nowadays. And he's just got all kinds of fantastic wisdom. So I try to talk to Fran as often as I can just to get some help on running my company. But you can find me as well on LinkedIn. And wanted to just say thanks to everyone for joining and enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.